Hi, welcome. My name is Segmani Labut, and I am the Executive Director of the Eastside Freedom Library. Welcome to the Eastside Freedom Library for today's program. Um, and so please, before I introduce our colleagues here, please allow me to talk a little bit about the Eastside Freedom Library. We are an independent nonprofit. Our work is around the intersection of immigration history, labor history, and social movements. The Eastside Freedom Library's mission is to inspire solidarity, advocate for justice, and work towards equity for all. One way to fulfill our mission is to preserve and promote the knowledge of our surrounding communities, its history, residents and institutions through educational collections and programs like the one we are having today. And story is a central theme to the work of the Eastside Freedom Library. And telling and gathering of stories through public programming, performances, exhibits, are some of the vehicles that help us achieve this. And stories also really encourage us to fight for our relatives, friends, and neighbors. So before we move on to our program, I do want to give you all some few technical instructions for our virtual audience. For our virtual audience, if you have any questions for our speakers at any time during the today's event, you can enter them through the Zoom's Q&A function. If folks are viewing through Facebook, you can enter your questions through the Facebook comment section as well. And if you can put the letter Q in front of your questions so we, our staff, and collaborators know that those are questions and not comments. And again, we will have time for audience questions at the end of the event. And without further ado, let me pass this along to our partners and collaborators, American Composer Forum's Executive Director, Vanessa Rose. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Such a pleasure to be back here with our partners, Eastside Freedom Library, such amazing collaborators. Just a little bit about this program. So the two of us, these organizations, are both centered on achieving equity and justice. We're joining together for this series from September of this past September 2022 to September of 2023, this following September, so we're right in the middle here, to lift up the stories and culture of immigrant communities in Minnesota and across the U.S. This is our third event, and our series is called Immigration, Identity, and the Arts, and we're bringing together artists and community leaders in dialogue, music, and literature. The series features Thi Bui's graphic memoir, The Best We Could Do, and is part of the NEA Big Read project. We do have many books free, available for you here if you're here in person. I hope you'll take one with you if you don't have one already. A video of this conversation and our previous conversations are available online, and we invite you to share them as well. The next events will be March 25th here and again on June 1st. So ACF, just a little bit about us, we support and advocate for individuals and groups creating music today by demonstrating the vitality and relevance of their art. We connect artists with collaborators, organizations, audiences, and resources. Through storytelling, publications, recordings, hosted gatherings, and industry leadership, we activate equitable opportunities for artists. We provide direct funding and mentorship to a broad and diverse field of music creators, highlighting those who've been historically excluded from participation. We were founded here in Minnesota in 1973 by composers Libby Larsen and Stephen Paulus, and the organization continues to invest in its Minnesota home while connecting artists and advocates across the United States, its territories, and beyond. We frame our work with a focus on racial equity and include within that scope, but not limiting it to, diverse gender identities, musical approaches and perspectives, religions, ages, disabilities, cultures, backgrounds, sexual orientations, and broad definitions of American. We want to take a moment to honor and acknowledge the Anishinaabe and Dakota people, the ancestral caretakers of this land. We take this time to consider the acts of violence, displacement, and unjust treatment toward them that have occurred over many generations. We offer our respect and gratitude to the elders of the past, to those living today, and to those who will come in the future for their careful stewardship of this land and its resources, and for the rich cultural legacy they will continue to create here. We also want to acknowledge Damian Strange for the formation of this project, and again, our wonderful partners, Eastside Freedom Library, as well as the artists joining us today. Just one more note about this particular project, as I mentioned, is part of the NEA Big Read project. It's a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. It's designed to broaden our understanding of our world, our communities, and ourselves through the joy of sharing a good book. American Composers Forum is one of over 60 nonprofit organizations to receive a grant to host an NEA Big Read project designed around a single Big Read title, and in this case, Thi Bui's The Best We Could Do. Now we're going to hear a little bit from Thi Bui herself about her book, and as a reminder, we have some copies here available to you as well. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Thi Bui. I'm the author of The Best We Could Do, an illustrated memoir. I'm really excited that this book is part of the NEA Big Reads for 2022 and 23. It's really exciting to have the story live on. And it's wonderful to be part of a theme about connecting neighbors, because I've always thought of it not necessarily as just an immigrant or a refugee story, but as an American story. My family is not special, as I say in the intro of the book. We're very typical of a lot of refugee and immigrant families. And it often takes decades to unravel the knot that is that experience. And so I'm very fortunate to have two parents who let me share our family's story. And I hope that communities can use my family's story to delve into the incredible complexities that exist within families like ours, the journeys we've gone through, and the things that we pass down from generation to generation, some of which are pretty hard to talk about. And I hope that our experience can be used to understand many experiences that have come to the US and continue to. So one thing I've always wanted to be asked about the book, but no one has actually ever asked me, is on the inside cover of the hardcover, in my first bio, I talk about growing up, remembering what it's like to kneel on the shag carpet and record mixtapes from the record player. And I grew up listening to Paul Simon and Beatles. So a lot of people have asked about my Vietnamese cultural influences, but the thing is, I came here when I was very little, and the cultural influences that I had were very mixed. And this to me is identity in the US. So I'd love to be asked about how Paul Simon lyrics have influenced my writing. And I'll give you the answer. They've influenced them a lot. Life as both beauty and sadness together, and how that exists across the board. And you can see it riding the bus or in your own family. This is what I took away from that music that I grew up listening to on records and recording to mixtapes.
Good afternoon. I'm Carolina Heredia, Argentinian composer and the Director of Artist Support for the American Composers Forum. I will be hosting this session today, in which we're discussing Thi Bui's The Best We Could Do in conjunction with the ideas and works of ACF McKnight visiting composers J.E. Hernández and Victor Márquez-Barrios. Just a little bit about the program. The ACF McKnight Visiting Composers is a residency funded by the McKnight Foundation, and it provides with meaningful support to artists to create music through an engagement with Minnesota communities. Music creators living in other parts of the US were invited to propose a residency that responds to or reflects the unique qualities of people and communities in Minnesota. Each McKnight visiting composer receives $10,000 to spend time in Minnesota pursuing a self-designed residency project. I would like to introduce our first guest for today. Composer and cinematographer J.E. Hernández is a Mexican-born, Houston-based composer focusing on elevating personal and cultural narrative through his work. J.E.'s music has been featured by distinguished ensembles and organizations such as the Kennedy Center for the Arts, Houston Grand Opera, Apollo Chamber Players, Foundation for Modern Music, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Contemporary Museum of Arts Houston, the Brazil National Orchestra, and in a wide variety of films, both in the US and abroad. He holds a degree from the University of Houston. Let's welcome J.E. Hernández. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you.
I would like for you to talk a little bit about your ACF McKnight project. What is the project that you're doing engaging with the Minnesota community?
Yes, so my project is focusing on creating a living account through music of the lives that immigrant workers are living out here in Minneapolis. And doing that through a series of interviews where I ask them all sorts of questions related to how they got here, what it's like to live here, what kind of pressures they're living under, how they relate that to their day-to-day situations, and then using that material, those interviews that I've collected, to put them into a work that is scored for choir and ensemble. And the genesis of that project is some of the experiences that I had when I was working as a railcar mechanic in Houston almost 10 years ago now. And I find it incredibly humbling to be able to have access to these communities here.
Can you tell us a little bit of where are you in the process of producing this piece?
Yes, of course. I finished doing my interviews at the end of last year, and I'm currently going through them. You know, this is a few hours worth of just raw material, and going through my own artistic process of delving deep into each individual's history and trying to see how I can best honor those stories in musical form. So a lot of heuristics to try to see what it will eventually sound like.
Thank you. And as I said, we are going to be discussing and engaging with these conversations and topics through your work as an artist. And so to get started, for the audience to get to know you a little bit, we would like to see a video of some of your works, an excerpt we're going to see now. So if you could talk a little bit about it, just give us a little view of what it's about.
Yes, so the clip that we're going to be seeing is the beginning of a multidisciplinary work of mine titled Voces Fantasmas, which premiered in 2021. The title translates to English as Phantom Voices, and it is a semi-autobiographical vocal drama that is based on my own experiences in immigrant detention 10 years ago. The work is for film, dance, and music, of course, and what we'll be seeing is the beginning where I'm really trying to introduce the entire idea through sound, in a sound world, in a specific sound world. So yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it.
Thank you. Let's watch this.
I am alive. I breathe and I look for a future where I am open and I grow. I look to feel and I want to fall. Do you see me? For the penumbra that is in front of me, in between you and me, is not real.
Thank you so much. We're gonna now welcome Victor Márquez-Barrios. He's a Venezuelan composer and guitarist and holds an extended catalog of works that include compositions for a variety of solo instruments, numerous chamber ensembles, mixed choir, electronics, symphonic band, and symphony orchestra. His music has been performed, published, and recorded by important soloists and ensembles from Latin America and the US and Europe. Works by Márquez-Barrios have received performances at numerous international music festivals, such as the Latin American Music Festival in Caracas, Venezuela, the Festival of Contemporary Music of Havana in Cuba, the Festival Internacional de la Clarinette, Hollywood Fringe Festival in Los Angeles, and the World Saxophone Congress, among others. Today, in parallel to his active career as a composer and guest lecturer, Victor Márquez-Barrios teaches music theory and composition as part of the faculty at Truman State University, where he is also the founding director of Uncommon Practice, the university's contemporary music ensemble. Let's welcome Victor.
Thank you very much.
All right, Victor, if you can also tell us about your project with the McKnight Visiting Composer Residency.
Absolutely. My project consists of a song cycle. I'm going to write a cycle of songs using as text testimony collected from different immigrants, Latino immigrants that today call the Twin Cities home. For that, I have a wonderful collaborator who's also based here, Rodolfo Nieto, who's back there, singer and lyricist and actor. And we are in that process of meeting with a variety of immigrants and just asking them to share their stories with us, and that those stories are going to become the main text for those songs.
Thank you. And again, we're going to also listen to a little bit of your music, since this is whether we're going to be engaging with the topic and with the book. Can you tell us a little bit about the video that we're going to watch now?
Yeah, so this is a piece for contrabassoon and piano titled Dancing at Daybreak, or Bailando al Amanecer. And it brings back a lot of memories of music that I listened to back home and that I grew up with. This is probably something that we're going to expand on later, but I think an important part of my identity as a musician comes from my father, who is a singer-songwriter. And this is music that I listened to with him that informs somehow this composition. So I hope you like it.
Well, I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to have you both here to engage in conversation about our experiences as immigrants in the United States, having been born in a different location from the vast land that we call Latin America. I'm hoping we can use this space to zoom in what does it mean to be what we call Latin American. From our perspectives, how has the experience of moving environments, speaking another language, making the necessary adjustments to connect with this new environment changed you as a person? And how is that part of your flexible identity informing your creative practice and output? I wanted to start by sharing a map that represents how Latin America is generally perceived in my view when I just moved to this land. And now, speaking about shifting perspectives, which is one of the strongest invitations that Thi Bui's book presents us. This is how I perceive Latin America. And since in a sphere there's no up and down, would you ever consider this view of the continent? Furthermore, in recognizing three different official divisions of this land that is called the Americas in the United States, which are 2 continents, 3 continents, and 1 continent is we're taught in Latin America, which we call America. Would you consider calling the United States of America or USA? The ability to shift perspectives is an essential skill to practice anti-racism and anti-discrimination, which ultimately elevates everybody's lives. It requires humility, compassion, openness, and curiosity. So let's practice this today in our discussion by beginning with finding the intersections between your experiences as immigrants in the USA and those that Thi Bui describes in her book. So my first question for you is, although the experience of immigration in the US is not a homogeneous one, have you found intersections between your experiences and thoughts with those Thi Bui describes in her book?
Should I? For me, when we talk about intersections in the context of that graphic memoir, the first thing that comes to mind, the first thing that speaks to me is family in life as an immigrant and how those are tied. How much does it affect my immigrant status? How does it affect me being a father and being a son too? And how it'll inform the conversations that I'm gonna have and that I'm having with my daughter. How do we understand each other? How do we communicate so I understand and support her childhood, which is completely different from mine, and just so I ask the same kind of support and understanding from her, which is, I think, is something that's beautifully narrated, portrayed in the book, and I very much identify with.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of context, your daughter was born here, so after, I put it in this way the other few days ago, you became a second generation, becoming a second generation from her point of view, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I should have given a little bit more context. So my daughter was born in Michigan and is being raised in rural Missouri. So when I say her childhood is completely different, her upbringing is completely different from mine and her mom, who's also Venezuelan. We live in this constant effort to pass on the things that we cherish and that we miss from home, without interfering and making sure that we don't ask her not to follow her own path and live her own childhood, which is, of course, once again, very different, but also, I hope, very happy.
I think where I find a point of intersection, Thi Bui said that she isn't often asked about her influences once growing up here. like her, I also came here when I was very young. Um, and I think part of growing up here as an immigrant has been having this heritage and sort of legacy behind you that you carry with you, and whether you consented to it or not. And for me as a Mexican immigrant, I think that's one of the ways in which I've come to think about what identity is. Um, because in Mexico, this idea of being a Mexican is actually something that was invented in the last century. So to think about how I relate to something that was invented and imposed upon me in a way that I didn't really have any choice before I was born, even before my parents and my grandparents were born, and how that relates to how I interact with other people in this country, has been a great source of reflection for me on a day-to-day basis. And I think, Thi Bui's right. You're often asked about something that you carry with you, though you may not have a great memory or even a great connection with it, which is part of the what contributes to the complicated nature of this.
Could you expand a little bit on what your statement of being Mexican was invented?
Yeah, so in the post-revolutionary period of Mexico, in 100 and change years ago, when power was consolidating, there were a set of Mexican intellectuals who wanted to reject everything European and how that was influencing Mexican art, Mexican literature, everything about social life. So they then decided to essentialize what an incredibly diverse nation with many, many different indigenous groups and non-indigenous groups. And they decided to sort of cobble it all together in a very crude manner, and then decide that this is what makes someone Mexican, including the standardization of Spanish, of Mexican Spanish as the national language. And I think a testament to how that has continued to affect Mexican people today is around the 1860s, something like 60% of people spoke indigenous languages in Mexico, and today it's less than 5%. So this invention of being Mexican and this kind of rejection of a past heritage continues to influence immigrants today who reject their parents. At least, I've had a lot of experiences with Mexican immigrants who are second generation, et cetera, who reject their Mexican past. And I personally feel it's strongly derived from that same creation.
Yeah, thank you. And since we're talking about language, and the next question is a little bit related to this, I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. Considering race is discussed very particularly here in the USA, I, for example, became a Latinx when I moved to the USA at my 28 years old. And it took me many years to own that category because I didn't quite understand it or ever used it before in Argentina, where I'm from. So talking about Latin America and how already the name is erasing all of the indigenous heritage because it just doesn't include it, right? And so what is Latinidad para vos and vos? And Latinidad is a word that doesn't have a translation, but we invented one, Latinxness. So, yeah, do you have any response for that?
Yeah, I feel about that term as I feel about most labels that constantly fail to describe the nuances of each person's unique story and reality. I'm happy to celebrate the things I might have in common with other people from Venezuela, other people from Latin America. I am not okay with letting go of the differences. I am not okay with ignoring those and put us all in the same box and under that same label. I don't know if there's a place for that in bureaucracy, but I don't think there should be a place for that in interpersonal relations and personal interaction. So I do not love the term. I just wonder, it makes me wonder, and we've been talking about this for days, if we can do away with these labels, is that a realistic desire? Is that a realistic wish? Because again, they seem to fail over and over.
I think the keep trying is always the answer, right?
Yep.
I mean, the problems are complex, reality is complex, human nature is complex. So as soon as we keep like wondering, I think that's the essential. I'm going to ask you the other follow-up question. That's okay. Going back to this, and part of me reconciling with the category I was thrown into in the USA was to grow an understanding, a love, and a pride of my indigenous roots, which happened so late in my life, and probably is one of the consequences of immigrating so far away from my place of origin, which made me rethink and review a lot of like my identity, or what I consider my identity. So in this process of decolonizing myself, which is hard, you wouldn't think that I would need to be decolonized, but yeah, I do. Have you decolonized yourself, and if so, in which ways?
I think, well, I'd like to connect it with the previous question a little bit. I think that for me, language has always been this great compromise in human communication. And I think that terms like this, like Latinx or Latin American, are trending more recently towards a more compassionate language that we speak with each other, which to me is anti-colonialist. The colonialist dogma to succeed is always to erase, is always to divide, is the total opposite of compassion. So on a personal level, my language, I've been gearing into also trend towards compassion. And having a deeper sense of connection in my daily conversation. You know, at a macro level, I don't know how whatever I'm doing is influencing public discourse, but I do feel that at the personal level is where I can do the bulk of the work to decolonize my kind of thinking. The less categorically I think about people, the less I reduce people to numbers, the less I do those things, the more I feel free, you know, liberated from this sense of colonial baggage, which I do feel I carry in many, many different ways. I think it's a continuous process, and until my very last breath, it'll be something I'm continuing to do.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to a bit of more music by these incredible composers, I wanted to ask a little bit to talk about what is composition, what role is composition playing in your journey as a human being, including all of these issues. How does it serve you as a way of processing? What do you expect from the audience, and how would you like to interact in that exchange?
You know, it's just so complicated to think about what my music should do for others. But I do remember distinctly the moment I really fell in love with music. And when I made a decision, I still remember, I mean, I was 14. When I made a decision to go forward with music forever in my life, it was because I experienced a healing quality from the music that I loved. From, you know, whatever genre, whatever it was, live or recordings. And I knew that feeling was incredibly precious and something I wanted to continue. So when I make these works that, you know, from my artistic practice are derived from personal experience and trying to say something about that, if one person can see them and also feel that healing, that's an incredible gift. And I couldn't, you know, I personally couldn't ask for anything more than that. That would be an enormous honor to do that for someone else. So yeah, that's how I think composition, music making is now embedded into my life forever.
I feel very similarly. I should say what Jose said and leave it there. But I'll support that by saying listening to other people's music, seeing or reading other artists' work has changed my life for the better, right? Those people took time and energy to tell a story that changed my life. I would love to try and do the same. It's certainly a form of communication. It's a way in which I communicate with the audience right now or down the road if anyone comes back to listen to a piece of mine in 50 or 100 years and finds any sort of solace, any sort of value in it. And that would be very rewarding. And it's, whenever I think about this, and I've been thinking about these things a lot lately, there's a sense of understanding what that phrase is said so often about giving is receiving, what it really means. Because I think we all go into music with passion because we want to, it's a challenge. We want to make the best music possible. And we are satisfied when we think we achieved something good. So it seems like a very selfish thing to do. I'm just going to go compose and hopefully I can write something that sounds good. And I'm still driven by that passion, right? But if in that process someone else identifies with it, and if that process that establishes the line of communication, then it's both, right? It's both an inner and outer dialogue.
Thank you, Victor. And since we're gonna continue now with another piece of you, would you like to introduce it?
Yeah. So, in recent years, I've been missing text, words in my music. So most of my music has been written for instrumental formats. And that's something I very much love, but I think words are very powerful, and I've been finding ways to incorporate text in my music. And I've been lucky to find great collaborators. The next piece, what we're gonna see is are highlights of a collaborative piece with a visual artist who also happened to be one of my best friends. And the entire performance piece is 18 minutes. So we created this shortened version where you're not gonna see the whole sequence, but you're gonna see highlights from the entire show. And the first part of it does not have words, despite what I just said. The second section of it does. And in a way, it tries to articulate common interests of these other artists, Rafael Vera and mine. He's also an immigrant, the son of an immigrant. And from a personal level, we share that and many other things because we grew up in the same hometown and went to high school together. And at an artistic level, we also looked for those points of convergence, those things that we both wanted to explore artistically, and silence is one of them. So yeah, this is a piece as a performance art piece with music that I created in collaboration with Rafael Vera.
Thank you, Victor. Those were excerpts from the full work. And so for our last question, and then we're going to open it up for you and for the live audience, I wanted to start thinking about the future. We discussed this a little bit, but it's always good to have some kind of vision if if we want to go towards something, right? So making that exercise of imagining how it would be a better world for us as human beings in general, in which like we can understand each other better, interact better, and be more compassionate, as you said. Compassion, you said, was a big part of what you think it's necessary to get to this understanding. So, how is that vision? ¿Qué necesitamos para vivir mejor? And ¿cuál es tu rol como artista en este campo de la música, en esa visión? So, what's your role as an artist in that vision?
She asked very difficult questions. I think we need to listen to each other and care, which is a different way to say something that Jose said earlier. It strikes me when you talked about compassion that it maybe it's sometimes perceived as a passive role, and maybe it should be a more active role to actually engage and to actually, as I said before, care when you're listening. And that relates back to those labels that don't say much and seem to oversimplify things. It seems that the easiest way is not to get too involved. In the video by Thi Bui that we saw at the beginning, she mentioned a couple of things. One of the she mentioned several things, but two of the ones that I want to rescue in the context of this answer is she talked about complexities, and she talks about conversations that are sometimes very hard to have. And so once again, taking the easy path out allows you to avoid those conversations that are sometimes hard to have, but that are necessary. And so assuming a more active role as a listener and as a communicator, I think, is probably one way to make things better.
They are difficult questions. I think about, you know, there will be a moment when no one here will be present anymore, right? We all, I think sometimes about how our death contributes to what we do while we're alive. And my role as an artist is more of, I think of it more as a duty to be as honest as possible, because I do believe that the more genuine and truthful the effort that I make, the more I'm giving something good to the world, you know, and that is a belief that's based on a value that I give to myself and to the things that I do, and that is widening the conversation. The more nuanced the conversation can be, the more truthfulness that it can involve, like Victor said, the better that moving forward we can all communicate, because we have to learn from each other in this way. It's impossible to be to shut your ears and close your eyes and then think that will allow you to move forward into a new stage of your life. And I think of society as having that quality as well. I think that's one quality that translates from the individual to the larger whole. So when we all can be more honest with each other and have these difficult conversations, we can contribute to that future.
Thank you, both of you. We're going to now watch another excerpt of Jose's piece. So is there anything else that you'd like to add before we watch this excerpt?
Mm-hmm. So earlier I mentioned that I like to use a personal experience methodology. What we're about to watch starts with the performers, the dancers, and the musicians reading off of pieces of paper. What they're reading is, so when you're a detained immigrant and you're going to court while you're detained, immigration court, one of the things that they'll do there It's very much like a factory. So there's a judge, and there are lines. There's an actual line of people that go up towards the judge, and the judge reads and renders out decisions on each individual's case. It struck me as extremely bizarre that it was very rehearsed. They had this strange rhythm, and I just remember thinking it's incredible that ink on paper and someone reading it so consistently can have such an enormous effect per individual. It was really just kind of bizarre. So I knew that I wanted to create a tangible way to evoke that sense of overwhelming confusion to the audience, and so that's the beginning of it. And then it's a lot more just sort of purely musical material, but I just wanted to find a way to transmit that that sensory overload into a visceral experience that the audience could listen.
Order of the immigration judge.
Respondent
This is a summary of the oral entered on September 30th, 2013, a waiver under Section 212 was granted.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, you can come to the microphone here. I'm not sure if somebody here in the production team can assist me with getting the questions from the online audience. Okay, any questions here? Yeah, I think that's going to be good. Okay. Yeah, please. I think you had to turn it on. Turn it on.
Oh, it is on. I think it is on.
My question is mostly about choreography. Did you guys write the choreography yourselves, or did you bring in someone else? I'm kind of curious how that interplays with your composition. Like if the mindset is different or kind of similar on creating choreography to go with the music.
Yeah, so I had a terrific team of collaborators for the piece that we just watched, the Houston Contemporary Dance Company, Filmatic Cinema, and the Apollo Chamber Players, as well as soprano Shannon Murray. So in terms of your question for dance, I'd been fascinated by dance for a very long time, and just I like the idea that the body can't lie, this kind of, I was enamored by a lot of that. And so when I did this work, I gave very, very little feedback. In fact, this is probably the only part where I told the choreographer, I have something in my mind's eye. Can you do something related to what I explained, which was this kind of like slow motion, playing with the sensibility of time. But otherwise, I really put the entirety of my trust in my collaborator to do what was right for the piece, which I feel was very successful. And so it was very much a case of me thinking while I was writing and thinking about the whole program. I was the director for the whole program, thinking about how they were going to play together and making sketches that related that, but then also saying, just trusting that it would be, it would respond in a way that was conducive for the work.
Can I follow up to that question?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah.
The mic wasn't on.
Okay.
Basically, my question. Okay, is that better? Okay. Basically, my question was, like, what part does pointing out the choreography play also in the composition process, and like, do you feel like they're similar, or kind of, in what ways are they different? In what ways are they similar? Yeah, that was my question.
Thank you. And my follow-up question is, was that the only performance of this piece? Or is there any other performance coming up?
Yeah, so far that was the only performance. That was in September 30th, 2021, which was serendipitously the same day that I had my order of relief. So it was a strange kind of anniversary in that way. But that performance itself was incredibly difficult to put together. There's just there is no precedent, so it was difficult. When you're doing something like that for the first time, it'd be like, I mean, I don't know. Any kind of analog of doing something for the first time has an enormous set of challenges. So, that was still during the pandemic, and there had to be so many rules, and the museum happened to be empty, so there were many things in its favor. But yeah, still looking for seeing when else we can get it performed.
Yeah, hopefully we can have a couple of more performances. It's such a huge production that definitely, it's such a beautiful piece.
Thank you. Thank you.
Victor.
In my case, so I was collaborating with a visual artist who was doing the performance in the first part. Naturally, most of those decisions were made by him. But it is important to us as part of our collaborative process, which has been going on for years now, and the piece has been kind of evolving over time. But it's important for us that those roles, there isn't a firm dividing line. You are in charge of sound, you are in charge of the visuals. He is allowed and encouraged to talk about the music and the sound and what he needs. And same with me. If I see something that I think is not working or could have a suggestion, then I have a say. But most of the credit, of course, goes to him for the visual part.
And how about that piece? Was that the only performance that you had? Was it repeated? Is there any plans for having other performances? I'm asking this because as a composer, it's so normal to have premieres and so uncommon to have follow-up performances. So it is a very important thing. There's so much work put, especially on the multidisciplinary kind of pieces. And I see every other field having like repeated performances, sometimes like 1 week, every night. And musicians are, for some reason, you know, just one and done. And it seems to be a lot of effort put into.
So the first part has been done twice. And when the piece was conceived the first time in 2017, it only was the interaction with the chair and that portion of the thing. Then when we got a request to present that at a different place, they also commissioned a second act. And so that second part where he goes off the stage and he's talking, that has been only presented once. And you're absolutely right. It's the second and third and fourth performance that are most difficult and where the piece continues to grow and take shape. So they're tremendously important, and I hope those opportunities keep coming our way to keep developing this project.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We have one from the internet.
Okay.
Someone asked, and I didn't take down their name, you talked about identity. Do you think you have a describable identity? Is identity static as a musician or immigrant?
To me, it clearly isn't. In fact, my identity as an immigrant is a relatively recent one. I've never thought of myself in those terms. And in terms of my work, which is very deeply tied to who I am as a person, my interests as a musician, as a composer, have changed over time, and I hope they keep changing. So yeah, that identity is also a work in progress.
Yeah, I echo everything Victor said. I mean, like, you know, growing up, I was a very omnivorous listener, and I think that's translated to the way that I make music. So, never standing still, you know, the opposite of static. That is how I work. And as far as myself, I think sometimes of identity as a set of learned and reinforced habits on a daily basis, which I personally always work to try and revise, change. I think, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And in that sense, I do think that my personal identity is in constant flux, especially that of being an immigrant. You know, now that I've become a citizen, which was, gosh, how long? 5 years ago now. It's also a different kind of situation, which is very just strange. I think that'll take me a long time to really understand.
Yeah, I love that common question, and I definitely agree that, you know, it's all in our minds in more general terms. But the one thing that is true is that part of that idea or sense of identity is the feedback that we get from the exterior, and sometimes that goes like beyond my own mind. So I can have my own ideas. I can be open. I can try to deconstruct what we call identity, and become just a human being, or something that is connected, hopefully, with everything around me. But I do still get a feedback from the people that I encounter, the places that I go. I do find like very real things, like obstacles to get things, or some of the obstacles that you mentioned. So there is that. It is my belief that there is also a bit of a limitation imposed by the reality that we are all forming. In a way, we're like collaborating on the creation of this reality. Any other questions? Okay. Well, can you tell us when is your project going to be ready, or like at least like an idea? When can we hear it? And if there's anything else going on in your artistic life that we should know?
Sure. So the current anticipated timeline of the work here is for the fall of this year. Though I'm grateful for the latitude that's been extended because of the evolving nature of the project. I planned to have this finished quite some time ago, but as the interviews grew, as the stories deepened, it's an ongoing process. But yes, that is what I anticipate for this year. And as far as other things, a work of mine for string sextet and choreography, More Dance, is premiering at the Wortham Theater in Houston, which is our biggest theater, in a few weeks. So trying to get ready mentally for that. And then I have something I'm doing with Houston Grand Opera in May, and then in the fall I have a few other works that are, you can just check them out on my website. But yes, thank you.
Our work is in the very early stages. We've conducted a few meetings, interviews, conversations, and they immediately started suggesting alternative paths, ways in which, as Jose described, the project can evolve into or morph into some version of what we initially presented. So we're in that process. We're having those conversations, thinking about these things. While that happens, I need to finish a piece for Ensamble a Tempo in Mexico. The deadline's coming. And another project that's keeping me busy these days is a recording project. So 2021, I released an album with a number of my compositions, and I want to keep doing that. And right now, I am working towards a chamber music album, and I've done some of those recordings, and some of them a few more are coming up this spring, and then post-production and all of that.
Well, we'll be in touch about that. And I'm so glad that ACF is able to support you on this amazing projects. It's really an honor to be accompanying you in this journey. And thank you for what you do and what you offer to the world. I want to tell everybody that the ACF McKnight programs and the ACF Create programs are open now for applications, and they're going to be open until March 14th. So go ahead and check our website, AmericanComposersForum.org, and contact me if you have any questions. And also, please sign up to the newsletters so that you get information about the two next sessions that Vanessa Rose mentioned. In March 25, March 25 and June 1st. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our amazing guests.
Can I say one more thing? Can I join the thank you choir?
Yes, please.
Yes, I want to say thank you to ACF for supporting this project, for having us here, this beautiful space. Thank you to the Eastside Freedom Library for hosting us. What a great place this is. But I also have a personal thank you to you, because we've been talking about these things in preparation for the event, and I'll be the first one to admit that I show up to those meetings with more questions than answers. And the conversation with the two of you really, I found it very helpful in trying to figure these things out, these very difficult questions and great questions that you came up with. So thank you both.
Yeah, likewise. Great, thank you. I can't top that. But yes, likewise, and thank you to you and to you, Victor, and to ACF, and for giving us the space to be able to talk about this in a very public way, which I feel is at the cutting edge of conversations happening in the arts right now. So yeah, very grateful for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.